2023 Luray Triathlon. This is the Olympic distance here, and we are going to dive into some race details for this 2023 edition. This race series is going to be held from August 19th to 20th this year. If we scroll down here, we can see some race details such as what we'll be talking about today. The triathlon here, which is a 1500 swim, 25.5 bike, and a 6.2 mile run. This is the race location here, and we are going to dive into the race info on this page here. Once you click there, you will also get the race venue address here, directions for it, lodging, and the schedule of events. Friday, August 18th, athlete check-in opens for the Olympic race only at 3:30, and there is also a practice swim for people who are already registered from 5 to 6 p.m. Athlete meeting in the transition area, which is optional at 5:15 p.m., and the check-in closes at 6 p.m. There is no Olympic bike racking on August 18th, so you will be racking the next day, which is race day. Also, quick note before we jump ahead, swimming in the lake outside of these designated times will result in disqualification. Not may, it will. They will nab you. They will get you. Saturday, 6 a.m. to 7:30, athlete check-in and the transition opens for bike racking on the Olympic race only. 7:45, all Olympic athletes are required to head to that swim start for the pre-race safety meeting with the 8 a.m. start time. Wave assignments will be posted ASAP, so keep an eye out for those, and also probably look out for an email from them to know what wave you are slotted to start in. Noon is going to be the award ceremony for the Olympic, and that is it. Make sure that you're there on time. Make sure you're there early. This is always a popular one. So be ready for it. Athlete check-in, they talk about some things to bring, like your USAT ID, your actual ID, your race registration, that kind of thing. Wristband, there's going to be a unique wristband that you get similar to Ironman events where you have to wear it to enter the transition areas and things like that. Bib numbers, make sure they're facing forward on the run. Bike adhesive numbers, this is a great example of what they want or what they are looking for out there on race day. If you have any other questions, make sure you talk to them. Timing, ankle chips, wear them on the left ankle. It's pretty standard stuff by now. Race day parking is also listed here along with the race morning procedure, transition area, to-dos, and how to properly rack your bike. Saddle on the rack. Taller riders may be required to rack on the bullhorns, but most people will be able to get away with that saddle racking position. Swim waves. Everyone's assigned a swim waves. They'll be provided to you by CAPS, so you'll be able to identify it that way. Also, an email will be probably provided to you in the coming days before the event, so keep an eye out for that, or postings on the website. Swim course start and the course. So the swim, please be at the swim start at 7:45 for that 8 p.m. start time. Make sure you are aware of things. Make sure you are aware of the bike course. They do post a map of it. There is a couple of hot corners, which we will talk about. Commonly violated bike rules, the drafting, blocking, no headphones, stay to the right, whenever possible to stay safe and also to allow other athletes to pass on the left-hand side. Run is a 2-loop course similar to the bike. You will be doing it twice for the Olympic, and again, no headphones. Wear your bib number on the front. Course cutoff times are posted here along with post-race procedures, things like that. Awards are also listed here, and course maps, which we are going to dive into right now. So this swim course, we've gone back and forth a couple years with an easier start and a harder start. And the problem with an easier start is you kind of let the group go. Because of the caliber of athletes here, you don't really have that luxury. And so for this first stretch of the swim right through here, you're just going to have to be on it. If it is a hotter race, the action kind of cools down at this second spot right here, or at the start of the second lap, people kind of fall into their natural paces if it's a more milder year. But don't take those corners to heart. In those hot conditions, there have been years where that hot pace just gets continued throughout the entirety of that first loop before cooling down for the second one. My smarter money is finding your pace probably by this corner at the latest, because we have a hard bike. We want to exit the water kind of firing on all cylinders here and being ready to go. If you go out of the gates really soon and just flying out of there. You hold that pace throughout the entirety of the first loop. You have the possibility of overcooking yourself, and that is probably going to happen right at this turn buoy on the start of that second loop. So again, make sure you are having other athletes drive the paces for you, and if there's no one else around, then you just kind of have to swim your pace, kind of go for it a little bit on your own. If you do have the luxury of a group and those group dynamics playing out within your wave, make sure you are having other people do the work for you on a course like this. Very challenging bike coming up, so you want to exit the water in a fast fashion, but also in a controlled fashion that allows you to really put the hammer down on the bike, because that is going to be what puts you over the top at a course like this. There is a bit of a jog to transition. If we zoom in, that's not right. If we zoom in on the transition start times on the transition areas, this is typically what has happened. The transition is somewhere up here, right? So you do have a little bit of a ways to go. And again, you can find that all on the course maps, and if you dive in a little bit more, you can start to see that transition area is located right there. Typically, you have to run up the steps, so you will have to be ready to rock and roll from the get-go, and that is why once you hit that second loop on the swim, right, you really want to start ramping things up in a controlled fashion on these last two corners of the swim. And again, I say that in quotations, just be aware that you are not going totally ballistic out there, but you do want to slowly start to increase the pace enough so that you're ready to rock and roll on the bike. Bike course is this beauty right here. Let's go back and change this to a map to make it a little easier to look at. This is a 2-loop course. You will be going out on the lollipop section right here before you do a counterclockwise loop 2 times. Second time you will peel off and go back down the lollipop, back to transition. What you'll notice on the first couple of miles of this bike is that it is no joke. 1,700 feet, let's call it 1,800 feet of elevation, and up until the point of the lap portion, we have 400 feet of that, of those elevation feet. Because of that, you need to be ready to rock and roll out of the gate. Again, you don't want to totally crush these hills up here, but you definitely want to be setting the tempo down and doing it in a controlled fashion. So if you are a person who exits the water typically and has a high heart rate, you want to kind of reverse what I just talked about on the swim to allow your heart rate to come down a little bit, because it's work right from the beginning. If you are someone who exits the water and has a lower heart rate, happy days for you. You know, you have the freedom to kind of work a little bit harder on the swim to get yourself ready to rock and roll, because it's going to be climbing city from the get-go. So let's highlight this again and kind of dive into it piece by piece here. As we climb out of the transition area, we're greeted with a nice 1 to 2% climb here, and it's not aggressive, but since it comes at the start of your race, it will hit a little bit differently. You will have some reprieve only briefly before you start the real climb that everybody sees and looks at when they do come into the transition area, and that is about a 5 to 6% average for most of that climb, the meat of that climb, before it cools off at the top there. But again, you're still climbing at 4 to 3.5% at the top before it dumps you back down for a slight hill, but if you drive this downhill a little bit, you will be able to go up that hill without too many issues. Next up, you will be greeted by a nice downhill. A lot of athletes really drive the pace on this hill. Again, you want the speed to be high, but you want to do that without a total cost of overdoing it here. As you get to the bottom here, you really want your legs to be working again, and this hill is really a recovery hill, but with speed. So you want to recover here as best as possible, because you do have a little bit of a stretch up this next hill, which 3.5, 4%. So you're starting to get to the point where it's turning up to a pure climbing hill. Not quite there, but on a TT bike, it kind of hits a little bit different. After that, we are rolling up and down, so this should be a faster section with minimal issues here and minimal effort needed to go on those faster paces before we get dumped down and we start the bigger climb that everyone sees. And again, as you watch this cursor as it's going up this hill, 3.5, and that's kind of where it taps out on this hill. So it is not it's not a crazy hill. right? But you are doing some work there. You will be dumped down at the bottom here. There is a little bit of a dangerous turn out on course here. Make sure you are aware that that is coming. That right-hander always gets people. You will be going faster than you want to at that corner. To compound this, if you are a slower athlete, you will be entering traffic on race day, so there will be bikers coming. There's almost always close calls out there, and it's just, it's unavoidable. It's a two-loop course, so you just have to have your head on a swivel, especially if you are a faster athlete coming down there. Just watch out for other people, and don't be afraid to hit the brakes and save your race, because they are not paying attention, or vice versa. Just be aware on that corner whether you are entering or going through or even exiting this portion of the course. Always have your head on a swivel here leading up to this corner. As you enter the main lollipop of this course, you will have to climb slightly before it dumps you down a little bit. And this is an area where athletes get suckered into, chasing the higher miles per hour here. Again, you want to be going hard, or not hard, you want to be going fast, but you want to be doing that without a cost that is really, really costing you. If your target is, let's say, 150 watts, and you are chasing 350 watts to push that 30-mile-an-hour barrier, that is not going to benefit you later on, because as we go around this circle here, what typically happens is the wind comes in two directions. It can either come in this direction or obviously vice versa. That is typically what you're going to find here. So if you have the first one, where the wind is kind of coming around that circle and pushing as a headwind right through this direction, right? When you start to come around this circle, you'll be battling the headwind along with this hill that you obviously see here. Because of that, you want to save a couple of your apples. Don't put them all in one basket on this downhill portion to allow yourself to work on this uphill portion. And again, you want to be going fast, but you want to be doing it in control on this downhill section. And as you start to make the turn, the real work starts here. And this is one of those sections where as you make these little zigzags, once you get to here, 8.5-ish miles, when you're here and you're continuing on, you can really see up the road a good while. So you know what's coming. It can kind of play in your head. If you have a headwind, it's a double whammy, triple whammy. If you're chasing some of those athletes up ahead and you've totally crushed this downhill portion a little too much, had a little too much fun, this uphill portion will hit you very, very hard. And as we're rolling up here, you can see we have a couple of 3%ers, but it's not super aggressive here, and towards the meat of this second climb, 3.5, maybe a couple times at 4%. So again, on paper, it's not super difficult, right? But this downhill beforehand, I know I keep talking about it, it really, really affects a lot of triathletes on a course like this. If you have controlled yourself on this downhill and you have a little bit left in the tank, you can afford the luxury of going slightly harder on this uphill. Think tempo, sweet spot area for sure, if not harder out here. But again, doing that within control, because this is the first loop here. We have another one coming up. As we enter this section right through here, again, you're making sure you have your head on a swivel and you are watching for other athletes coming down to start to join this circle. And other athletes around you. It's a common place for just a lot of chaos to happen. So leading up to this corner, know who's in front of you, who's in back of you, and next to you, and all areas. And so you can go through this section safely. As you start the second loop, things change a bit. You want to continue driving this pace. It might be a little difficult. You're probably going to have to start dodging some traffic in and out of these sections, these roads right through here. They're pretty straightforward. They're not super complicated. There is that one left-hand turn right here at the bottom of this hill, so you are turning up into an uphill. But for the most part, if you're a front runner, your main problem here is the traffic that's clogging up the road. If you are an athlete who is not in the front, you're a mid-packer or even back of packer, your problem is going to be having these faster athletes around you. So before you think about passing someone, you might want to look over your shoulder just briefly and see anybody back there, and if the answer is no, Don't be afraid to go around somebody at this section. Now, this little uphill, right, I didn't talk about it on the first loop, but this changes on the second loop. This becomes very, very important and is a great jumping off point if you are in a group at this point in time. A lot of people get lazy at this section here on the second loop, and it's an easy and really opportunist place to just kind of go up the road without minimal fight from the remaining members of the group. Again, you're going to drive this very similarly to the first loop. Tempo, sweet spot area. If you've saved up enough from this downhill and recovered, again, just think of this as a longer interval. You're probably going to be in the aero position, and you probably won't have too much trouble on the back of that cassette back there to kind of stay in that big ring. For the most part, if there is a headwind, ignore my advice. You're probably going to be in that small ring. That's just the way it is. Then once you make the turn, you're going to do what we talked about in the beginning, kind of in reverse. And I'm going to highlight this once we get off of here so you can see what I'm talking about. We're going to peel off, and we are driving down this hill, -3, -4%, and it slowly fades away. So from mile 22.5 through 23.5, this is an area where it starts to turn into a false downhill, and you're still going down, and you'll want to go faster. So a lot of athletes do get suckered into going a lot harder than they should at this point in time and really paying for it on this hill. Everybody talks about this hill, and then the mega hill back here really gets you, and that's because of this mile right in here. Race this smart. If you are in the front running group, your real opportunity to kind of bridge the gap between people is this section right here through 23.5 all the way to 24.4, 24.5, maybe a little bit beyond that. Right, and then afterwards, this last hill is a common point for athletes to really put I'm going to put this in quotations, put a stamp on the course. Highly, highly recommend you do not do that and just simply get up this hill, because you got to start thinking about the run, which is coming fast. Okay. This is an example of our run course that we have here. Transitions right through here. We're rolling it through this course 2 times out on course. We have about 500 feet of elevation gain on this course. And you're going to start off running downhill, believe it or not, mixed with a couple of uphills. But as you can see, we have an uphill, and that first one happens at mile, let's call it 0.9, 0.95. So this first mile, you have a real opportunity to blow your race. And what I mean by that is, since it is a downhill run, right, a lot of athletes really crush this first mile, even if they're not trying to. Their legs start to slide in front of them. They're activating all the wrong muscles, and they're going to pay for it later on. The first indication that things usually go wrong happens at this point right here, because the road starts to tilt up again. So with this first mile, you want to be doing it in control, right, and having your form ready to go. Don't be worried about the excessive paces. You want to be having your effort be on the lower side during this section. Failure to do that is going to result in poor race dynamics later on, because this is going to be the first point which you can and should start to increase your effort level. Notice I did not say pace. Effort levels should be increasing here, but within realistic ranges for you. After this point in time, the real running starts, and that pretty much lasts all the way back to the transition area, if we're being honest. You can break it down and say control it a little bit on this downhill while you rejoin the course, and then it's a little bit rocky and bumpy up and down, but again, we're talking 2.5, 3% in most places. And that is a bigger hill than you want to do on the run, so it is an opportunity for athletes to really explode themselves out on race day. Just be careful out there, minimize the damage, use the aid stations as best you can, because once you do start that to come back into the transition area, it really picks up and the hills really jump up. You're seeing 7.5% mixed in here, and then that second little ramp, it starts from 0 and goes all the way up. The incline just increases the further you go before it starts to cool off near the top, and that was 4.5% that we saw at this hill. So you're going to have to manage your effort on the first half of this race for the second half of each loop. It's probably a better word. Second loop starts and you're going to run it very similar to the first. The only difference, well, the couple differences are on this downhill section, your paces might be a little bit faster and probably should be a little bit faster than that first loop, but again, you want to be doing it in control. That's not really the point at which you want to explode things and just start flying down the road. Your paces do need to be faster, but again, keep it in control. This little uptick here is the real point at which you can start your final kick. Again, start the final kick, and that really is going to happen at mile 4.25 right there. We only have a little bit left to go, maintaining your pace before you start to kick up this main drag here. Athletes that don't appreciate or respect the heat on a course like this are going to pay for it later. So make sure you're bringing fluids, you're using them, you're actively cooling yourself, and you are paying attention to what is happening out on race day. Be smart here. One thing I did not show you is the best bike split here. This is an example of a bike course here, and you can see that the speed tells the story here if you didn't even want to look at the power numbers. You can see that it decreases as you get closer and closer to the start of that second loop. Then you get up and you're just managing that speed loss until you start to get back out onto that lollipop section, that stick of the lollipop, back to the transition area. And if you wanted to break down the power a little bit more, you can see here that it slowly increases on each loop, right? And that's the name of the game here. Athletes who fail to increase here and in reality just keep it steady on the power or even drop here are going to pay the price in terms of placing and bleeding time overall. And that is the Luray Triathlon for 2023. If you got any questions, please reach out to me. I'll be happy to answer them. And, with that, good luck to everybody this year.